as you may or may not be aware, the First Friday events are sponsored by the Town of Woodside's Arts and Culture Committee. You know, this is a very important program because it covers a very dark portion of our history. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, it affected a huge number of American citizens, not just people who have come to the United States intermittently, but these were people who were actually citizens of the United States. They were incarcerated. Eleanor Roosevelt had a fit, and the president refused to even talk to her about it, but she was adamant that this should never have happened. And this evening, we are fortunate to have the story from one person to share their family experience through all of this. So thank you again for joining us. Without further ado, Karen.
I want to thank Tom and the Arts and Culture Committee for inviting me to be a First Friday speaker. It's an honor. I wanted to start off by crediting one of my cousins, front row, Jeanette. She started this researching of our grandfather, we fondly call Ji-chan. She was cleaning out her garage, thank you for doing that, and discovered all of these journals and writings and books. She started writing a biography about our grandfather, and then she submitted all of the above to the Hoover Institute at Stanford, and that is where all of our things are right now, thanks to Jeanette. I also want to introduce my tech guru. For those of you who don't know Nick Gatos, he is. I know you think he's a student of mine, but he's actually a staff member at Woodside High School. He's a real music teacher with bands and marching band. And because Terry asked me how old he was he my student? I said, no. Anyway, he's also my band director in all my musicals. So Nick, thank you very much. We will be putting up 3 storyboards that Jeanette and I laboriously put together. She more than me because she's a little more on let's measure and make sure it's correct than me. I just eyeball it, but she's very correct and on everything. It looks really great. We are proud to present our story of our 2 families. Last year at this time, the 4th of July Parade Committee and the San Mateo County History Museum asked us to share and represent the Japanese American flower growing families. So we did a little bit more research and added to our storyboard for today's presentation. You will notice up here are the crests or mons of our family. The Inoue side, Jeanette's side, is on the left, and my side, the Arimoto, is on the right. How many of you have played around with your genealogy or know a little bit about your background? Sometimes there's too much information out there, but you need to do it sometime and find out what's going on in your family. Kotoharu Inoue, Ji-chan as we call him, was born in a samurai family in 1884 in Japan. He travels to the West Coast starting with Seattle in 1906. He did not get accepted by the Japan's Royal Navy, so he came out west. He decided to train under Domoto Brothers in Oakland, and he studied the chrysanthemum growing technique. Because it's 1913, they did not have an ability for immigrants to own any property because there was an alien land law. And so he joined with the Higaki family with the Redwood Nursery in about 1910 on the leased property. Well, those of you who know the Jefferson Road mural by the Sequoia Station, I know Donna knows and Jeanette knows, this picture is actually one of representing Japanese Americans. It's on the mural. So do take that walking tour when you have time. So this is what our starting is in 1910. In 1915, Hirosuke Inoue, that would be my uncle, was born. Now, Ji-chan is an Issei, first generation. That means he's an immigrant. Is there anybody in the audience that's first generation? Think about that, okay? Now that Uncle was born in 1915, he's a Nisei, second generation born. So Grandpa Jichan could now buy property. So he buys 17 acres on Volota Road and begins Sequoia Nursery. These are some outbuildings of Sequoia Nursery. These are the cheesecloth greenhouses. This was invented so that the chrysanthemums would be protected from the weather, especially the wind, and the sun can be filtered through. Notice, Karen, Patrick, the clothing in the 1920s. As we go chronologically, you will see different clothing. This is 1920. My mother was born in 1918, Yoneko Inoue, on Volota Road in Silver. That's the corner. And it's still there today. She was born there and dies there on Volota Road 90 years later. Right here, my mother is 8 years old. And if you notice, the pompons or chrysanthemums are very large next to her head. She's either small, okay. Thank you. Remember I said there was no audience participation? Okay. 1926, this is the main house was completed on 1401 Volota Road. Now we have 7 greenhouses on 17 acres. As I said before, Silver Avenue still exists today, now with townhouses and condos. Next is a picture of the Inoue family, my mother, my uncle, Jichan and Bachan. I wanted to show you this picture so that you notice my set of grandparents in their kimono. Next is a comparison between 2 sets of grandparents. The Inoues on the left, and my grandfather and grandmother Arimoto on the right. Grandma Susie was born in 1887 in San Francisco. So she already is a Nisei. She and her sister Hana, my great aunt, is supposed to be the first Japanese American females born in California. My grandfather, Mark Arimoto, was born in Japan in 1883, comes over to the West Coast in the early 1880s. You will notice that my grandmother is in her San Francisco costume attire of 1904. Yes, she was at the great earthquake in 1906. This scene is at what is called Japan Flower Day, initiated by my grandfather. He was very prominent in the chrysanthemum growing in Redwood City area. In 1927, the Paramount Pictures was very interested in our industry, so they sent over a film crew for the newsreel. But they didn't want to use the Japanese American laborers, so they instead staged 12 Caucasian white children in this newsreel. On September 5th, 1930, here's my Jichan speaking to thousands of people on our property, Sequoia Nursery, celebrating Japan Flower Day. The 3 of them, my uncle, my mother, and my grandfather in the late 30s. Again, I think it's interesting to note the clothing and what they wore every day. In this case, you will notice that the moms are more spidery instead of the big pom-pom. This is Jichan in a cheesecloth greenhouse. It's a very famous picture of his in the 1930s in more informal wear. In this one, a gift from the California Chrysanthemum Growers Association to the Japan's Prince and Princess. Since Jichan was president, he presented this gift to them. The Association of the Chrysanthemum Growers was there to help the community get established and gave them legal and financial advice. This is my Uncle H, or High, as he was called. He was one of the first Japanese American males to graduate from Stanford in 1938. Go Bears. After the war, Ji-chan donated mums in a boutonniere style to both Stanford and Cal. This is a picture of Miss San Francisco. Sorry, you spelled it wrong. And my grandfather, again, at the Japan Flower Day in San Francisco in 1931. It's a picture of my mom right here on the right. She's about 16 years old. She is greeting the Prince and Princess of Japan at our Sequoia Nursery. This photo I have put in the San Mateo County History Museum on the second floor in the Immigrants Gallery. This is my mother, 12 years old, in a chrysanthemum kimono in front of the 1401 house in Redwood City. You will notice this is San Francisco with the ferry building up there. October 3rd, 1931, Redwood City has a float for the Chrysanthemum Flower Day. Kiku is the Japanese word for chrysanthemum, or mum, and it's much easier to spell M-U-M than the other. I bet you can't spell it right now. I won't quiz you on that one. This is an actual letter from the Kikumatsu committee asking in September 14th, 1931, for Ji-chan to be sure to commit to providing all the flowers for that festival. Jeanette and I thought it would be nice to show you the formal calligraphy of Kotohoro's Inoue's name in calligraphy. In 1937, Redwood City Harbor was an opening, and they asked Ji-chan to have a float. So he's in the front, and this is again a chrysanthemum float. And by now, Ji-chan is rapidly learning English. December 7th, 1941, the bombing of Pearl Harbor changed many, many lives. If you notice in Ji-chan's card, see the little arrow? It's going to where the card was issued. December 6th, 1941. December 7th was Pearl Harbor. So obviously something was going on that they knew about. So Ji-chan was arrested by the FBI around noontime at his Volota place. My mother remembers them coming by and wondering what's going on, because they barely had heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Many people of the Japanese race threw away a lot of photos and anything incriminating them with their affiliation to Japan. As you notice with all the photos that Jeanette has found, that we did not do such. We could have thrown away the royalty and all of the other pictures, but we kept them. So obviously somebody had an eye on my grandfather as an enemy alien. So there was very little communication for the first couple of months with the FBI taking him quickly away. As Tom already referred to, Executive Order 9066 from President FDR, all the Japanese and Japanese Americans that lived in the states of Washington, Oregon, and California are the only ones that were evacuated under Executive Order 9066. So imagine you were given a couple months to get your affairs in order. Selling your car, your pets, your home, your belongings, anything you owned, you gave it away, you sold it for pennies, or you threw it away. You were allowed to have two things that you can carry. This is an actual prop, thank you, Donna, from the prop room at Woodside High. It's a 1940 suitcase. Look at the size of it. I can barely get all my hair products in this. But I know my mother being a clothes horse, I heard she stuffed in things like her red dress and other things. No one knew where you were going or how long or where are you going. So you just took everything as you could, as you carried. Nowadays, you have go bags and you have your electronic devices. So all of your information, all your documents, all on one thing, right? Or you have backups and you have cloud and all that stuff. But that was here is now. Think about what would you take right now? But then again, you were back how many years ago? And you had to do that, especially if you had young children. The Inoues went to Tanforan. The Arimotos were at Santa Rita. In the case of my mom, she was quoted in one of the books of saying what the conditions were at the Tanforan. Since they weren't really prepared for this, the horse stalls were not really cleaned very well. Each single family lived in one horse stall at Tanforan. So 23-year-old Rabbit City native Yoneko Inoue had a severe reaction. Quote, "The manure was coming out from the wood. My eyes would be swollen. I was allergic to it. I never knew anything like that before, like swollen mouth and swollen eyes when I got up." Unquote. So that was one of my mom's experiences. As I said before, there are the Issei, the Nisei, and now you have my father, who's a third generation Sansei. And then you have my sister, fourth generation American citizen, now in prison. This is one of our students in our Legends class, Kei Ikuma. She is in the center. I have some friends in the Legends class right now looking at it, saying, "That's Kei?" Yeah. Her two sisters on the left-hand side both had their name tags on as prisoners. This was taken by Dorothea Lange, a very prominent, important photographer. She and Ansel Adams were assigned to take pictures. Ansel Adams made it look like it was, fun and games, where Dorothea took more personal interest in her pictures. So they cropped out the two sisters and show that a lot. And even at the Tanforan Memorial, after they closed it down, they have a bronze statue of the two sisters, but not Kay. Kay told me that she has in her hand her name tag, so she was not in the picture or in the bronze statue. We're amazed that we found a picture of the enemy alien prison camp where my grandfather was taken. Guess which one he is? He's the one in the front in the dark shirt. So for months, there was no communication. I have letters that my cousin Jeanette copied for me from my mother to the government asking and pleading, "Where's my father? Can he join us somewhere?" But to no avail. After October 1942, 120,000 plus Japanese and Japanese Americans were put in railroad cars with an unknown destination to 10 different camps, evacuation centers, assembly centers, prison camps, whatever you want to call them. The Arimotos went from Santa Rita to Topaz. The Inoues went from Tanforan to Topaz. I have a quote from my mom who talked about the condition of Topaz. "When we got to Topaz," Yoneko said, "there was a sandstorm there. I couldn't believe why everyone had white hair. It was all sand." My sister turned 6 at Topaz. Remember I said she's Yonsei, 4th generation. At that time, it was very unusual. In 1943, my other uncle, Edgar, was drafted from prison camp into the 442nd Nisei soldiers. Remember, he's a sansei, third generation. That was unusual. My uncle and my dad, other uncle and dad, did not get drafted. My mom met my dad at Topaz in 1943. If you were had a sponsor at that time, you could leave the camp, and they were in Utah, and you can go work for someone. I like to think of this as East meets West. My father, a sansei kid from the streets of San Francisco, meeting my young Nisei lady, my mom, schooled in tea ceremony, obon dancing, tea, and matchmaking and things like that. And yet, they're in a prison camp together where it's common. No one is different. We're all in the same miserable condition together. One positive note, that my parents did get together, and my sister Barbara was in our family, and that was one positive note of anything that happened at that time. I told you that my father and my uncle did not get drafted, and in the meantime, in 1944, the 442nd were finally allowed to go fight. So they were on the European front, mainly in Italy, making amazing progress in such a tragic situation where they were sent in to find or to save the American troops, many lives and casualties. My parents, in the meantime, moved on to Chicago with a sponsor, and my other sister was born. Ji-chan comes back to us in Topaz. My Uncle H, like my father, both lost their first wives to TB and were not allowed to go and join them and die by themselves in sanatoriums. So as I already told you, my father meets my mother. My uncle meets his wife. He's a prisoner in Utah in Topaz, and she's a free woman living in Salt Lake City. That's unusual. Both men were recruited in 1945 to teach at the Stanford Language School Japanese to the American officers who were going to occupy Japan. My father is kneeling on the second from the right, and my uncle is in the back on the far left. After World War II ends, the 10 camps close. Where are the 127,000 Japanese Americans and Japanese going to go? Some stayed in the state they were imprisoned. Some slowly came back home. Some, like my brother-in-law's family, were still at Tule Lake in 1946 because they signed the questionnaire no and no because they weren't citizens of the United States. They were Japanese born. So they weren't released till 46. So we come back here, a young family, the Arimotos on the left, the Inoues on the right, and Bachan Ji-chan in the middle. We were very lucky that the 17 acres were all intact, all glass panes of the greenhouses not broken. And that is because we leased the land to the Wong family, who took very good care of it. Because we had so much land, and we were not well off capital-wise, but we had the land, Ji-chan said that any family or friends could stay on the property until they were stabilized. But other families were not so lucky, like Bill's family, dirt poor. The sad part about it is Ji-chan comes back to us, a broken man. As long as I knew him, he could not speak or walk. He had untreated Parkinson's disease. This is a picture of a map of Ji-chan's incarceration journey. Jeanette found out that at Angel Island has a museum that if you have relatives that were incarcerated and you wanted to find them or something out about them, you can go there, and she confirmed all of our thoughts of where we thought Ji-chan could have been. For a while, as I was growing up, I never knew about camp. In the 1980s and 1990s, families finally started talking about it. The Japanese Americans and the Japanese had a saying called gaman, or let's go with the flow, or make the best of it. And that's what they did while they were in this enforced incarceration. As a youngster, I always thought camp was, oh, they're going to camp, go camping. I never thought about that they were in prison for all that time. One of Ji-chan's greatest accomplishments was starting the California Chrysanthemum Growers Association in the 1940s. This association helped the growers with legal aid, community activities, loans, language barrier problems. It survived the war, but our crops changed from chrysanthemum on our sequoia nursery to roses, carnations, and gardenias in the greenhouses, and in the fields, the sweet peas, the sweet peas, the iris, and the daffodils. It's a picture of my father on the right and my uncle H in their greenhouse in 1946. Just to let you know, Uncle Ed did survive the 42nd, and he came back to us. It was the most courageous battalion ever in World War II, with the most number of casualties. This is an aerial shot of Sequoia Nursery on Belota Road in the bottom. And there are other neighboring nurseries, as you could see. In 1940s, there was a place called the California Flower Market in San Francisco. So my father would get up very early in the morning and go off to the market with his wholesale flowers to sell to the retailers. And by the way, the San Francisco Mart still exists today. These are two of my aunties from the Inoue side. What they're doing now is preparing gardenias with leaves. And the delicate bloom is in the middle, and you staple the leaves around it. I was allowed to do this chore. I didn't like it. The only thing I remember is stapling my other sister's finger. It's not my favorite chore anyway. Grew carnations. Like chrysanthemums, they were on single stalks, and you had to disbed them so that the main flower would grow with nutrition. That, again, was not one of my favorite chores. It was hot, smelly, but the best part about it is there were no bugs. These are gardenias as they were growing in our greenhouses. You will notice the greenery. And being so delicate, these flowers had to be immediately refrigerated and preserved that way. With their boutonnieres is how they were sold. This is a aerial view of our Sequoia Nursery greenhouses, the glass greenhouses. We had about 6 different neighborhood families on Belota Road. My uncle was president of JCL, which is the Japanese American Citizens League, for at least 3 different times. This is an installation picture of him in 1954. JCL today, still around. We have President Steve Okamoto right here in the audience. They are needed in our community. They help the Japanese Americans with legal aid or medical or any activities that they have. In this case, my uncle's on the far right and my mom's in the middle. Jeanette and I decided to brainstorm and figure out all our accomplishments of our grandfather, and we were very pleased to see how prominent he was. In the Japanese American community, besides all of his presidencies or he was also involved with the judo, the church, the Red Cross, and the Chamber of Commerce. While we were at it, we decided to do our parents. And these are our accomplishments. We proudly can say our parents were involved in the community. My dad was the first Japanese American Rotary president. Both uncle and dad were presidents of Kiwanis. My mom was in scouting, PTA, and a business club, women's business club called Zonta. My father was in the Peninsula Celebration Association, which is your parade committee in River City. All of them were involved with the Nisei Bowling League. The Arimoto family got out of the flower business in the 60s, and the Inouye's got out in the 70s, and they went out into the regular business world. Jeanette and I decided that we'd like to recognize the River City Japanese American flower growers in that time period. They were a very hardworking, industrious group, but they couldn't compete with the property tax increases, the water bills, the energy costs, and competition from imported cheaper flowers. So this area in Redwood City sold out in the 80s. This is a more detailed view of the Sequoia Nursery. Volota Road is marked, Woodside in the top and Jefferson on the bottom. And the only house left of the family is Jeanette. Nick thought it would be fun to see what Redwood City looks like now. Kind of densely populated. Jeanette, can you figure out where your house is? Yeah, so our Arimoto family had our house on 1507 Volota Road. It's still there today. We don't live there, but it's on the corner of Palm and Volota. And I thought that was very amusing that Nick thought we should show you how densely populated it is. Woodside High School required summer reading this year into the Big Read with 3 books. And they are 442, Facing the Mountain, Fighting for America, Nisei Soldiers. Lisa Kamara, head of Big Read, has proposed that all the students read one of these books, and then on September 19th, we will have the day where we will share activities. We also are going to show a documentary. And in this documentary, it's called Kinsu Kuroi. And there are 2 families featured in it. The beginning of the war, during the war, what happened when draft, and after with some of the prejudice around. We invite all of you in the community to see this wonderful documentary on September 18th through the 21st. We have flyers up here on how to buy tickets. It's at Woodside High School. We are going to show you right now a 2 or 3 minute teaser for this documentary because we think, Lisa and I, that it's very important that we share the story in a documentary. One of the female leads, is actually one of Lisa's past students, Keilani Kitaruura.
We left the old country and crossed an ocean to start a new life in San Francisco. After years of hard work and sacrifice, the promise that was America was in our grasp. Then the world shook.
It's 1941. 世界は変わってきてるわよ。
And nothing was the same.
I have terrible news.
Everything gonna be okay. They're just scared.
That's what worries me. Scared people do stupid things.
You answered no to a couple of the loyalty questions. That's a problem.
I'll go shoot the Nazis. I'll shoot the Japanese. All you have to do is let us out of this stinking camp.
What's your name again? Jerry. Gary. Did the colonel call us Americans? Yeah, he did. Why?
When the colonel calls us Americans, it means we're in for a rough time.
It's gonna be okay.
Stop saying that. It's not gonna be okay. Nothing's gonna be okay.
Every morning, every evening, ain't we got fun? Took our money, oh, but honey, ain't we got fun?
So we hope that you will join us on one of those days and get a further insight into the happenings in Japanese American lives during World War II. So this is the flyer and the QR code. In conclusion, I wanted to say that, or ask actually, how many of you had heard about the incarceration before you came here this evening? Good. Because when I went to school, I don't know about you guys, but there wasn't a lot said in the textbooks. It's a sad story and situation for any immigrant group, not just mine. The mistrust. We hope it will never happen again to any other group. Talk to your families. Get your background straight. Be proud of who you are and your heritage. And at this time, I'd like to take some time to introduce to you some people in the audience. I would like to introduce to you the Patrick brothers. Their father was one of the American officers who went to Japan and actually brought back a Japanese wife and their mother. JCL president,
Steve Okamoto. As I said, Lisa Camara.
Steve Okamoto. As I said, Lisa Camara.
And
from Woodside High School. I see Leslie. And is there any other Woodside High School? Okay. Thank you, Leslie, for being here. So my sister Barbara, Yonsei.
Brother-in-law Bill.
Okay, fourth generation.
He was 8.
My brother-in-law Bill. She was 6. He was 8, incarcerated.
My cousin Donald.
I would like to introduce my brother, my cousin Donald, and Jeanette, who I've talked about. I also would like to introduce my Legends group. We all work out together in CrossFit. You have to be over 70. That's us. And then I wanted to talk about one other family member.
Okay, so Lisa, raise your hand.
Okay, so Lisa, raise your hand.
Barbara's.
Lisa is one of Barbara's daughters. So she is 5th generation. Go say.
His 6th generation.
Her son is 6th generation.
His sons
Rokusei.
are 7th generation.
His sons are 7th generation.
How many of you
Nanase.
have 7
And so, how many of you have 7 generations?
Some of you may be Star Trek fans. You may not understand or be aware that Lieutenant Sulu, George Takei, he was incarcerated in the camp. And I just wanted to read a quote from him. And he's written a children's book. He's also been involved in a play that talks about his experiences in the camp. And this quote, he's referring to what his father felt. Well, it gives certainly to my father, who is one that suffered the most in our family, an understanding of how the ideals of a country are only as good as the people who give it flesh and blood. we must remind ourselves that an assault on any one of our liberties and freedoms is an assault on all of us. So important thoughts to perhaps take with you this evening. And I want to remind you that next month we have a little different theme. Jim Caldwell is very popular and we love to have him back. He's going to be talking about John Singer Sargent in Spain. So we hope that you will come back and visit us again in October. So thank you once again for coming this evening, and thank you, Karen.